bother with things that the Sussexes do.
Yeah.
But he got people's backs up again, didn't he? He's become quite a divisive figure in the US, as much probably as in the UK. He and Meghan, and I think we've probably said before, it seems to sort of go more on political lines over there, where Republicans tend to be less keen on him. So, because he had a bit of a pop at the Supreme Court's judgment on abortion rights, and obviously we discussed that a couple of weeks ago, and that didn't seem to go down well with people on the right of politics in the US. People wondering why a British prince, albeit one who no longer represents anybody, was discussing what was going on in the US, and then it was quite a cataclysmic speech. I mean, he was just doom laden, wasn't it? And he talked about the pandemic. He talked about climate change, and of course, climate change. He and Meghan are pretty vulnerable on that. To a point, all politicians and all members of the royal family are vulnerable on it because they do quite a lot of travelling for their jobs. He doesn't really have a what you call a full-time job anyway. Obviously, he's got a few different things that he's got an interest in, and where I think he was particularly vulnerable is their penchant for travelling on private jets. So they came over for the Jubilee in an executive jet, which we think would cost, roughly estimated, around about £160,000. And those private jets rack up an awful much bigger carbon footprint than if you're travelling on a passenger jet service. This time, my understanding is they did actually travel. He and Meghan did actually travel on a regular passenger service, but there have been occasions in the past where they've lectured people about changing.
And of course, he said a painful year and a painful decade.
Yes.
But also, obviously he's talking about the wider picture, but he's also talking from quite a personal point. But this is also the decade as well, it goes without saying, where he referenced his soulmate, Meghan. But it's also been the decade that, he's met Meghan, and there she is by his side. From an outsider's perspective, you can sort of see why people thought that it was a bit of a photo opportunity.
Well, yes, I suppose they're always going to be prone to that. I mean, there was some curious body language between them. I don't know if you saw their. Body language. It's not something we tend to do very often in print, but they did seem a bit awkward with one another at times, and he didn't seem very happy. But maybe he was just nervous. I don't know.
Yeah,
he's just speculating.
And obviously they've stepped down as senior royals, and royals and politics has always been something which is very tricky territory.
Yes.
Do we know anything how the news that that he's spoken out and touched on politics has got back to the royal family, and if so, what has their reaction been?
No, there wasn't really. I mean, the first couple of times that he and Meghan spoke out, particularly about US politics, there was quite a strong reaction from people close to, close to members of the royal family, but not this time. I mean, they all run the risk. I mean, it's a really difficult balancing act. As it happens, on that very same day, Prince of Wales made a speech about getting down to net zero, about getting to a place of equilibrium with carbon emissions on his estate and in the wider world. And he's been talking about that for a long time. Everybody knows that's his position, but there were a few raised eyebrows about it, because he was speaking on a day when the Conservative leadership campaign was at the forefront of our news agenda.
Yeah.
And it's been narrowed down since, but there were candidates in that well, there's Truss is still, talking about wanting to do away with some green taxes, for want of a better phrase, and certainly at that time, one of the candidates was questioning whether net zero was really the net zero targets were really the right thing for Britain to be pursuing. So, had that person then become prime minister, there are always going to be problems when politicians start speaking about politics. Effectively, what is politics, and when members of the royal family, I should say, start speaking about politics. So, and Harry, being Harry, took a fair bit of stick over that as well.
And to be clear, Charles made the same speech that Harry did. So he also made a climate change.
He made a speech about
on
climate
the
change
same day.
on the same day. Yes.
So it sort of seems like their schedules just aren't aligning. Harry wouldn't have known that his father was going to be making a speech, and I'm assuming
No, you wouldn't. No.
Charles didn't know.
To be fair, it was on the hottest day of the year. And, in fact, the day that Britain saw temperatures of more than 40 degrees Celsius for the first time. So you're going to talk about, to illustrate the problem of climate change and extreme weather, of course, there's no better day to do it.
That's the day to do it, yeah. Indeed. Okay, then. Well, I'm sure that this story will be hanging around for a while now. All sort of body language experts and stuff will be all over it. But there we go. We thought we'd kick off with that one, as lots and lots of people were talking about it. I think we might have taken this to a poll. If not, then that's absolutely fine. We can move on and come back to that later. Now, do you think Prince Harry got his message across clearly at the UN? No. 90%. Yes. 10%. That's what I mean. That's the continual issue, isn't it? I mean, I did say photo opportunity. That perhaps was a bit harsh, but I'm not sure if he wants to get the message across personally, that he's actually getting the message across, really, because the whole day will be more about, we're speaking about their body language, we're speaking about the relationships back and forth with the UK. We're not actually speaking really about the message that he said. So are you surprised by that, Richard?
I'm not surprised about the hostility towards it, which I think is behind that poll result. I mean, I think they've got a problem, and of course, every time they do appear in public now, they are accused effectively of trying to stay relevant. They're private individuals in a way. Why do we all care about what they say? Well, clearly we do. It is newsworthy sometimes, and particularly when it impacts on the British monarchy. And there's always that suspicion. There's the allegation levelled at them that they didn't mention. He didn't mention the Queen this time, but he did mention his mother. And there's this. There is a feeling. Certainly on this side of the pond, but I think on the other side of the pond as well, is that they need to stay relevant. They need to be in the news to earn money, essentially.
Yeah. And that's going to be the drama going forward, isn't it? But they made the headlines around the world. So if that's what they were planning to do, and we're talking about it, then they're achieving something. So there we go. We're going to move on now. We're sure the Queen has heard what they've been up to. What her opinion is on it, we don't know. But obviously their relationship has changed lots over the years, more so in recent years. Obviously, we've spoken about this before on the Royal Roundup. But a story came to light this week about the Queen at the funeral, and obviously, this was at the height of the pandemic restrictions, COVID restrictions, and everything else going on with it. That picture will be, shown for years and years to come, sitting by herself. Awful. But the story came to light about, Meghan's relationship with the Queen. Is there any truth to this, Richard?
This is, I think you're talking about the story in Tom Bower's book, saying that on the day of Duke of Edinburgh's funeral, the Queen said to a close aide, "Thank goodness Meghan's not coming." Very hard to get to the bottom of it, in the sense that there were a very small number of people around the Queen at the time in the bubble. Quite where that story's come from is not clear. But I have to say I've met Tom Bower before, and I've spoken to him a few times about stories and about his books, and he's a very thorough researcher. I wouldn't ever discount what he writes in his books necessarily, but on the other hand, although Buckingham Palace, as a matter of routine, doesn't comment on, says it doesn't comment on biographies and books.
Yeah.
He likes to stay above the fray. There were sources close to the Queen saying, really questioning that story. They weren't saying out and out this isn't true, but they were asking, do you really think on the day of her husband's funeral that she was thinking about anything else other than the love of her life, that the man who'd been her key support, her rock for so many years, for 73 years of marriage. And I have to say, when you think about it, that does seem quite a convincing argument.
It does indeed. But it goes without saying, obviously, that the Queen and Harry and Meghan, those three meeting together, they probably actually, if you think, probably a dozen or so times have actually met. So, actually really getting to know each other hasn't really been an option for them because of the pandemic, though, as a three.
No, the Queen. No, I mean, I do know that when the Sussexes were living at Windsor, the Queen was popping in to see them quite regularly. I think, really, because she was worried about how unsettled and unhappy they were, and so I was told at one point that she was going around to see them to make sure they were okay.
So
they weren't.
No, and the fact that they moved as well, she can't exactly pop round for a cup of tea now. So there we go. Okay, well, obviously there'll be lots of stories coming from that book. So I'm sure there'll be probably another one next week. But there we go.
Well, I think there's another one today, isn't there? Because the book was being serialised in the Times and the Sun, but it's now sort of a bit of a free for all. So there's a story today about. It's a new twist on the allegations about Meghan making Kate cry, or Meghan would have Kate making her cry. There are fresh allegations about what it was that allegedly made Kate cry, what Meghan said. So I think we'll probably be running something on that in tomorrow's paper.
Yeah, and that relationship as well. That's a whole another ball game, isn't it?
There's no real sign of any fence mending going on there at the moment. So.
No.
And so, of course, we have. I mean, I don't know if this is a useful time to mention it. We heard yesterday that the Invictus Games, sorry, not the Invictus Games, the Earthshot Prize. Second awards ceremony will be in Boston, in the US, Boston, Massachusetts, in December this year. It's been widely reported, particularly in the US, that William and Kate are going to Boston. That wasn't actually announced yesterday. It's not being confirmed, although my understanding is it's pretty likely that both of them will go. But there's always been this possibility that they might make a statement about flying and do it all virtually. But I think it's a pretty good bet that they both will end up in the eastern US in December. So inevitably, that's led to speculation of, will there be a wider US trip, and might they go to California, or might there be some meeting? But that is.
And of course, that ties quite well into Christmas festive kind of period as well.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we're talking about early December, I think, but it's watch this space at the moment. Nothing is for certain on that at all.
I'm sure we'll be finding out more speculation as months to come. I can't believe we're already talking about December. Madness, and it's a heat wave.
There again, you see that with the Cambridges. I mean, there were pictures on social media and on online news of them taking a helicopter somewhere, and I'm curious about this because there was a story a few months ago that I was told was true, that the Queen was very concerned about them all travelling together in a helicopter, with her being the second in line to the throne, third, fourth, and fifth in line to the throne, all together in a helicopter. And there they were going off. I suspect they might have been, we know, I think I said last week that they're away on holiday at the moment, and so I suspect they may have been going away on holiday. And if that was the case, well, it's again, the Cambridges aren't completely. They're under the spotlight when it comes to their carbon footprint as well. And although, of course, that was a royal helicopter which now runs on sustainable aviation fuel, so a little bit better.
So, I mean, it begs the question: who will be speaking about next? Obviously, Charles and Camilla, when they were visiting Cornwall this week, do you know if they took a helicopter there?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because I wanted to check this, so I have tried to check this today, and I'm not sure about going down to Cornwall. I don't believe so. Okay. But it was pretty obvious that they must have travelled by helicopter yesterday, because they went from Cornwall round about late morning at lunchtime, and they were in Portsmouth at 2:15 to attend an event about the Falklands, the 40th anniversary of the Falklands conflict. And indeed, yeah, they did. My understanding is they flew by helicopter, and I couldn't quite get to the bottom of whether it was a Royal helicopter or whether this was a Royal Navy helicopter, but they flew over the aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth before landing and going to a reception on the ship, right, which was for serving members of the Royal Navy and the military and the wider military, but also for veterans of the Falklands conflict 40 years ago. And one of the interesting things about that, as far as I'm concerned, is there was one member of the royal family who served on the front line in the Falklands conflict. And has he been at any of the numerous anniversary ceremonies this year?
No.
The Duke of York? No, he hasn't, as far as I'm aware. So I was asking somebody close to him earlier on this week whether he would be at this event in Portsmouth, and was told no. He's just, you won't be seeing him at any. Well, in fact, I spoke to a couple of people close to him, and certainly one of them was saying you won't be seeing him at any of these events. And I think we all know the reasons why. He's in disgrace. He's withdrawn from public life, and I think any time now that he attempts to attend a public event, he's going to face accusations of, he's trying to wheedle his way back in. And indeed, in April, at the start of the anniversary, because the Argentines invaded in April 1982, he put out, you may remember, he wrote a 700-word piece that went out on Instagram, on his ex-wife's account on Instagram, about his recollections of leaving Portsmouth on HMS Invincible, and then serving there as a naval helicopter pilot, where he tells us that when he was shot at, he developed this condition where he can't sweat because he couldn't, because of a build-up of adrenaline. Earlier this week, unable to sweat. Don't know what that means for him.
does the I mean, where is the notion or the rule to these to Prince Andrew that he's not allowed to? Is that coming from the Queen herself, or?
Well, I think, I certainly, I think the Queen and Prince of Wales and the Duke of Cambridge are very keen for him to avoid attending official royal engagements. I suppose the point is that he could, like we said about Remembrance Sunday, both he and Harry could just attend as servicemen, ex-servicemen, and march with their ex-comrades through Whitehall on that occasion, and he could attend events as a veteran, just not as an official member of the royal family. I guess he's always going to face the problem that if he's photographed at one of these events, the difference between being there as a member of the royal family and being there as a veteran is going to be lost in the media coverage.
So, who is he spending time with these days, and what is he doing with his life? Do we know?
Well, from what we hear, he's climbing up the wall. He's just spending a lot of time at Royal Lodge, as far as I'm aware, on the Windsor estate, going horse riding quite regularly, and not doing much else. I have been asking whether he has been doing some charity work, and it's been suggested that he could take a leaf out of the book of John Profumo, the defence minister, who famously was forced to resign back in 1963. I hope I'm right. In a scandal when it transpired that he'd been sharing, he'd been having a relationship with a woman who was also having a relationship with a Russian spy or a Russian defense attaché. And Profumo then has spent the rest of his life working for charity, but in very low profile, doing it behind the scenes. And it's been suggested that Andrew could do the same, and that would be the way to redeem himself. Of course, I asked somebody close to him, whether he might be doing something like that, and this person said, "Well, if he is doing that, we're not going to be telling you, are we? Because that's the whole point of it. Because we don't want to be telling the media what he's doing, because we don't want media coverage of it, because then he'll face the same accusations again of trying to get back into the public eye and public life." Well,
I'm sure his daughters, have always been quite close to him, haven't they? So I'm sure that they'll be on hand, and he still seems to be on good terms with Sarah Ferguson as well.
Yeah, definitely on good terms with his ex-wife. I think it's been suggested there have been a few tensions with his daughters, but I think particularly with Eugenie over some of the things that over the scandal, over the Epstein scandal. But I don't know if that's true. That's just what I've read.
No,
what I've reported.
No. Indeed. Okay then. So that's an update on Prince Andrew. I'm sure it won't be the last we hear about him.
Probably not.
He'll get too much itchy feet. He'll want to come back into the frame. And we do obviously know that the Queen is still, very close with him, it seems. So there we go. Okay, well, we've seen the royals on the move, obviously, this week. We spoke about Princess Anne last week, but she apparently did 3 visits in one day on the heat wave. She won't stop. What's the latest? You've been at Buckingham Palace this morning, haven't you, Richard?
Yeah, I've been at Buckingham Palace to see to get a preview of the summer opening for tourists. The palace is open to tourists from tomorrow. For about 10 weeks, and so it's the first time it's opened since 2019 to the public fully, and in addition to the tour of the state apartments and the bit of the garden, you also get to see this stunning collection of jewellery that the Queen owns. It's a private jewellery, not part of the royal collection. So there are, people who are interested in royal jewellery will have a fab time. I'm pretty sure, that you've got things like the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, the coronet that the Queen wore when she was Princess Elizabeth at her parents' coronation, when she was 11 years old, along with the outfit she wore.
So, how long are they going to stay there before they go back into private use?
Well, this is the thing. They are frequently used, these things. I mean, some of the tiaras are, the Queen's favourites on show, and so they'll be there for the summer. Normally, the Queen, in the past, the Queen would inspect the exhibition before departing for Balmoral. Usually, at this time of year, and she'd normally then spend about 10 days at Balmoral, Craigowran House, on the estate, while the castle is still open to the public, and then move into the castle after it had been tidied up a bit and made ready for her use. This year, not quite clear. I think I'm expecting her to go to Balmoral, but as far as I'm aware, she hasn't seen the exhibition. She stayed at Windsor, and I'd highly recommend it. It's well worth a visit. I think the visitor numbers are likely to be higher than they have been at this very limited sort of openings that they had. Like last year, they opened the gardens up a little bit. COVID is no longer the same concern that it was, so there's no sort of social distancing. But because they're not expecting as many international visitors this summer as they would normally expect, it's only going to be open for 5 days instead of all 7 days of the week.
Fine. Okay then, but still lots of time. Lots of time to go and visit. And what else?
That normally heralds. That's normally round about the end of the season for the Royals. But I think there are still probably a few more engagements to come yet. Probably next week. I was
about to say, what else? Do you know anything you're allowed to say for the rest?
Well, yes. I mean, one thing that has been announced is that the Duchess of Cambridge will be doing something in Plymouth on July 31st. So she'll be out, I think, on the water with the 1851 Trust, which she's a patron of. So this is a charity it works really. What she's done with it mainly so far has been in Portsmouth, sort of 200 miles up the coast near where I live. So the idea behind it is there are a lot of kids who live in our maritime cities, Portsmouth, Plymouth, two sort of great naval bases, who live very close to the water but never go out on the water. Indeed, I grew up near the water, and I never went sailing. Closest I got was going on a rowing boat up the river on a pub crawl. So the idea is to get kids, particularly kids from more disadvantaged backgrounds, out giving them an experience of sailing. So she'll be out doing that. I mean, there's been nothing. I don't know. I'm only speculating about this, but normally the last thing that Charles and Camilla do, which would typically be the end of the sort of the regular royal summer season, would be to go to the Sandringham Flower Show. I think that's sort of middle of next week. So it's not been announced whether they're going or not, and I'm not privy to that information at the moment. But it wouldn't surprise me if they would be spending a few days up in Norfolk.
And obviously that sits quite well with Camilla's loves of the outdoors, doesn't it? So.
Yeah. And it's actually really them paying homage to the Queen Mother, to Charles's beloved granny, because it was something she always did, and she always combined attending the Sandringham Flower Show, with spending a few days at Sandringham House, surrounded by interesting people and friends, and often artists, poets, writers. And Charles has continued that tradition, and he started off still inviting many of the same people, and I think there's been a gradual transition, and so it's now more people who are his friends, his and Camilla's friends. So you get people like Jules Holland staying for a while, a musician, and Dame Maggie Smith has been quite a regular visitor over the years.
So there'll be lots of good photos then coming from that one.
Yeah, hopefully.
That's if they go, of course. That's if they go. But I'm sure there'll still be lots of the royals to see over the summer months. And I'm sure Richard will keep you all updated on his Twitter. And of course, the Royal Roundup will also keep you updated. But as usual, if you want to keep an eye on all of the stories and keep an eye on our Instagram, Daily Express Instagram. Richard's also got Instagram. You can find him on there too. I persuaded him to come on, so he has got it.
I need to use it a bit more, don't I? Yes.
But you'll be able to find him, and you can find him on the tagged stories on there, and all of our good posts, giving you a time and a place. And it does change mostly every week at the moment due to different royal events and engagements. But we will be back next week with a time to be confirmed. You can keep an eye on our socials to see all the stories and the highlights from today. And thank you if you're watching live, and thank you for catching up if you're not. And thank you, Richard, for coming on.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye.